To Ukraine, and an unpopular mobilization law to replenish troop numbers is working better than expected, according to the military. Kyiv's new law came into effect in May. It requires all men under 60 to update their personal information with draft offices. And the army says that if the number of new recruits continues to rise, it may be in a position to draft a demobilization law later this year. That would allow war-weary troops on the front lines some much-needed rest.
Ukrainian soldiers training. The average soldier's age is over 40. The army spent the last year in desperate need of new recruits, after the government has said 31,000 soldiers have died since the war began, and many more are wounded. Those estimates are considered low. Earlier this year, the government took measures to put pressure on men of fighting age who had left the country. Ukrainian consulates would no longer renew their passports, making it more difficult to live abroad. And in May, a new draft law lowered the age of conscription to 25. The government also started drafting prisoners, a move that had long been resisted. Now it all seems to have worked. A parliamentary spokesperson told the Ukrainian press that if current trends continue, the government can demobilize by October. That would also give soldiers who have been on the front lines for more than a year a break. The new measures were unpopular and hard to enforce, both in Ukraine and in EU countries where many Ukrainians fled. German officials describe being put in a difficult spot.
We can't implement Ukraine's draft here in Germany. There is talk of draftee men, but who is a draftee? We can't mobilize them from here, we can't decide, and we can't reasonably examine this issue here.
Meanwhile, Russia continues to attack relentlessly with its much larger army. For Ukraine, getting enough soldiers on the field is a matter of life and death.
For more on this story, let's bring in military expert Christopher Morris from the University of Portsmouth in England. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We're hearing here Ukrainian authorities saying they are finally getting the draftees that they need. Do you think this is thanks to these measures that were put into place to force more men to enlist?
Well, it's certainly been a far bigger success than anyone was expecting. Now, there has been building antipathy with the mobilization efforts, but nevertheless, it has been remarkably successful. And the goal of 200,000 is certainly foreseeable by the end of the year. Now, some of the additional measures have certainly helped, but there's still rumors, for instance, of, people with, I suppose, medical exemptions being found on the front line. Like, there is definitely a problem with human capital at the moment. And whilst this mobilization will go some way to resolving that issue, it will not completely evaporate for some time.
Let's set the stakes here a little bit. How important is having enough manpower to Ukraine's war effort at this point in the war?
Absolutely vital. And whilst this mobilization has been incredibly positive, it's not just about bodies. It's about getting them trained and getting them effectively equipped. Now, replacing the seasoned troops that are currently present on the currently present on the front line is going to be difficult. Now, hopefully, if we can get these troops trained and in a position where they're well equipped, they'll be able to hopefully have an impact.
How hopeful do you think those who have been serving on the front line for more than 2 years should be here? Is it going to be the case that they will finally be able to come home to their loved ones?
Now, unfortunately for service people currently on the front line, I would not be holding my breath if I was in their position. So, whilst it is very positive that there is a pipeline established to provide fresh manpower to the front line, there are limitations that are going to exist. So like I say, getting them trained and getting them into a position is going to be absolutely critical. You've also got to consider that the people that are currently on the front line, many of them have been fighting since the outset of the conflict. Now, this is incredibly exhausting. It's also an incredible wealth of combat experience that really strengthens the backbone of Ukraine. Now, foregoing those advantages is going to be a difficult thing for the Ukrainian military to consider at the best of times. Now, as Russia is still piling on the pressure, demobilizing, certainly before winter, is going to be a very difficult decision indeed.
And so what do you think we will see from Ukrainian authorities in their efforts to make sure that that number of recruits remains steady or even continues to rise?
Again, it's maintaining that steady pipeline that's going to be a real challenge. A huge part of that is front-end recruitment, which, there are going to be difficulties around that as the war progresses. Ukraine has already made some incredible adaptations to its recruitment pipeline to maintain that grip on manpower. Now, fortunately, Western weapon systems are also starting to filter in, which means there's another advantage there. And agreements with nations like Poland additionally mean that it has the resources to train these people in fairly short order. So they're not just going to be trained in Ukraine, they're going to be trained in external foreign locations as well, which is, again, it's really going to kind of increase the diameter of this pipeline.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on DW News with those insights. That is Christopher Morris from University of Portsmouth in the UK. Many thanks.
Thank you so much.